and welcome to Camera Club of Richmond Spotlights. We are actually here today at VCU Health, Department of Radiology, to interview the chairman of the Department of Radiology, Dr. Ann Fulcher, who is also a member of the Camera Club of Richmond. Ann is one of our terrific photographers, and we are going to go and meet her and see some of her wonderful work that's hanging along the hallways of this building. Hello, welcome to CCR Spotlights. My name is Karen Davis, and I am the Communications Director for the Camera Club of Richmond. We are happy to be here today at VCU Health to interview Dr. Ann Fulcher. She's a radiologist here and also a photographer and a member of the Camera Club of Richmond and the Virginia Professional Photographers Association. So we're going to learn a little bit more about Ann, but I thought I would read you a little bit about her, give her a little bit of bio. She's a native of Virginia. She sees photography as a means of preserving fleeting moments that will not recur and that in all likelihood will be lost to memory. Her goal is to capture the essence of a place and to connect with that place through the majesty of its people, animals, and architecture. Her photographic journey began in 2011 with a trip to the Galapagos Islands and has since taken her to India, Africa, Cuba, Borneo, Easter Island, Iceland, Costa Rica, France, Peru, and yes, of course, to lots of beautiful places in her own great country, such as Alaska and New Mexico. As a radiologist who has made a career out of reviewing images, she's delighted to combine her love of all that is visual with her love of travel and to share the results with others. So Ann, thanks for joining us today and inviting us into your office. And you heard the phone ring, so yes, we are. It will happen. We're in Ann's office, but she's sparing us a few minutes to go over and talk a little bit about her and her photography. So we want to get to know you a little bit and see some of your beautiful work. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Tell us about your journey into photography and how you discovered this passion.
Well, thank you first of all for your kind introduction. And you're right, Karen, it is in fact a passion for me. It's a hobby, it's a wonderful diversion and a creation of a work-life balance from being here, which I love, and also being out in nature, which I also love. So it all began in about 2011 when I was going on a trip to the Galapagos Islands, as you mentioned, and I noticed that, gosh, that place is so beautiful that a point-and-shoot camera would not suffice to capture the beauty. So I decided that I would begin to investigate a digital SLR camera, and I did some research. I consulted a pro photographer here at VCU Health, and he agreed with my choice. So off I went. I bought that camera, and lucky for me, the next week there was a beginning photography course at the University of Richmond in the evenings, and it was taught by Linda Richardson. So she gave me a great basis for photography, and then one night when she was not there, David Everett filled in for her, and he and I became friends in that way. So with that as my basis, I kind of went out and photographed on my own during the weekends and then studied books during the week and tried to apply what I'd learned. So with that as my foundation, I set off for the Galapagos Islands in 2011.
Awesome. I understand also that it may be a little bit genetic because I think you said that your father was a photographer in World War II. So what influence might that have had on you, and how did he maybe inspire some of that interest in photography?
He definitely loved photographer. He was not a photographer for the military. He was an infantryman who landed on D-Day. On Omaha Beach.
Oh, wow.
And he told me he took his camera with him because I don't think they really understood what it was going to be like. And he said that was the first thing that went overboard. But throughout the war, he did take many pictures. I have those. He bought cameras throughout his time there. And I came along much later in his life, and he gave me my first Instamatic. He was a very good artist. So he would stage scenes, take photographs of them, and then paint them. So for my graduation from high school, I received a Canon AE1 film camera, and I really enjoyed that in high school and college, but quite frankly, Karen, life took over. And photography went by the wayside. There was work, residency, I was in the military for 4 years, and then more work. So I didn't get back into photography until about 12 years or so ago.
Okay. Until the Galapagos.
Until the Galapagos, absolutely.
They inspired you. Right. So speaking of what inspires you and motivates you, what drives you to continue taking photographs, and what's the message you want to convey through your work?
That's a great question. Well, I love to travel, but I cannot imagine traveling without taking pictures. And so many times, even after a recent trip, I'll go back and say, oh my gosh, I totally would have forgotten that nuance of the trip if I didn't have a photograph of it. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is also, I was a biology major, so I really always liked nature, wildlife, animals. So that's another connection when you're out there. I think one of the things about travel photography, though, is it allows you to be any type of photographer you want. It kind of includes wildlife, landscape, street photography, and as you recently taught us, environmental portraits.
That's right.
So it's really a great kind of genre that is multifaceted.
So, Anne, we touched a little bit on your love of travel. So why don't we explore that a little bit further? Tell us some of your favorite places that you've been and some of the favorite pictures that you've taken.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever traveled to a place I didn't like, so it's kind of open-ended. This is a photograph that I took in Paris, France, at the Louvre. And it really combines a lot of what I like to do. I took it very early on, I think in 2015, and I like the architectural aspect of it, but what I really love to do is night photography. And the Louvre was a perfect place for that because it is beautifully lit at night. But what happened was that I had a native person from France ushering me through Paris, and we were rushing from one side of Paris to the other to make it to the Louvre before they turned off the lights at midnight. So I had only about 10 or 15 minutes to make as many images as I could, and this was one of my favorite ones. Brings back great memories, and I think that's one of the things about travel photography, which is so great. It does bring back memories of where you were, who you were with, and what you were feeling at the time.
Yeah, that's a stunning shot. I love that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then moving across.
Yes. This is another one also from Paris, obviously, at the top of Notre Dame. I stood in line for about an hour and a half or two to get to the top, and once you do, you're kind of ushered through pretty rapidly. But I had it in my mind, I guess they call it pre-visualization, that I really wanted to get this with the outlook over Paris at the time, and that clouds just worked on that particular day, and everything kind of came together. But one of my favorites, and also a really good memory. And fortunately, I was able to see Notre Dame before the tragic fire.
I thought so.
Yeah.
What year was this?
This was in 2015. These two were made at the same time.
Yeah, just beautiful.
Yeah,
I love the,
thank you.
The perspective of the gargoyle helping you overlook the city.
Well, that's kind of what I had in mind.
And then let's move down the wall.
And this is just another one from the Louvre.
Trip.
I wanted to really get a different perspective. I think many photographers, including myself, you want to go in and you want to get the postcard shot, but it's very important to see if you can get a different angle than what you may have seen. I think it'd probably be pretty hard to do it in such a celebrated place as this, but I wanted to have the Louvre coming in, and then some of the adjacent museum buildings in the scene as well. So that was my thought in crafting this one.
And our evaluators who are into triangles would absolutely love this picture. I love that picture.
All right, thank you so much.
So you've done a lot of night photography as well.
I do enjoy night photography quite a bit. Have done it usually in non-urban sites, such as in Joshua Tree, and most recently at Easter Island, which was fabulous. But I also like shooting the urban landscape as well. It's a different challenge.
So Anna, I'm sure along with your travels in city life, you have encountered, it looks like, a lot of wildlife. And that seems to be another passion of yours, to capture some of the critters that you come across. And I love this puffin.
I absolutely loved taking photographs of this. This was in Iceland, and this guy pretty much posed. Again, you kind of have an idea of what you would like the photograph to be without getting too entrenched in that. But this guy turned in every direction. He had the sand eels in his mouth, or whatever they are, and he was taking them back, or she was taking them back to her young in the adjacent cliff. So it was just wonderful to see them go back and forth. This was not taken with a very long lens. They were very, very close and unafraid, and as I said, putting on a show. So it always amazes me what wildlife will do if you just stand still and let them do their own thing.
Awesome. And in case you didn't know, Ann's office has this magic photo wall that we can use to trade out photos. This has always been one of my favorites because we saw this in the Camera Club of Richmond competition a few years ago, and I believe it won one of the major awards. Tell us about this one.
It was very exciting for me to take this image and the series that went with it. I grew up riding horses. I had a horse, so I was very attracted to horses. And as soon as I heard about the white horses of the Camargue area of southern France, I knew I had to go there. So I researched it, and I found a photographer who lived there and who had grown up there and who therefore had access to all of the private land. So this is one of the Camargue stallions running through the Mediterranean Sea at sunset. And if I could have scripted it myself, I could not have made for a better scenario. I absolutely loved photographing this. This was one of the easier photographs of this scene, though. In another one, they would run the horses to us, and we were actually knee-deep, literally, kneeling down in the marsh with waders on, and the horses would come to us and break around us. So I have to say, it was good that I was familiar with horses and comfortable around them, because even for me, that was a little bit breathtaking, but it was totally worth it. But this is one of those beautiful white horses of the Camargue, and I just feel so fortunate to have been able to have the opportunity to photograph them.
Yeah, a bit of a heart-stopping moment.
It was.
Yeah, I'm
It
sure.
was.
But the lighting is just exquisite. I mean, that is incredible. And he posed and he made eye contact and the whole bit.
He did his job for sure. So I was very, very fortunate for that.
And you obviously did your job because it's just a beautiful, beautiful shot. And I will mention, this is on canvas.
Yes.
So when we created our magic wall here, we were able to just borrow and shift things around. So, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things you point out there. Different photographs look better on certain types of media. And to my eye, this was more of a painterly photograph, so I just thought that this would probably convey the image better on a canvas. And I like these drop frames sometimes that float around the image rather than the matte. So
yeah, and several of the others, for instance, is this a leopard that we saw earlier?
This is actually a jaguar.
A jaguar.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and he's on glass, and it's just a stunning shot that you might not have been able to appreciate as we were chatting earlier in the chairs. But.
yeah, when you print on glass or metal, it really preserves the image quite well, particularly for an office setting like this where you might want to wipe it down. It's just super easy to maintain in a public area.
Right. So, Anne, we've talked about you getting out there with the wildlife. I don't know that you could get a whole lot wilder than this. And as Leo, our producer, said earlier, we hope you had a really long lens for this picture, and then we were quite surprised at the answer.
Not so much. So this was made in Lake Clark National Park, Alaska. We were out on the shore, and the bears would come and feed in the shallow water. So even though this is really the same species as a grizzly, they're referred to as coastal brown bears because, as the name implies, they live near the coast and they feed over the plentiful fish in this area. In the June timeframe, they're crabbing. At this time, when I was there in late August, they were fishing for salmon. And the salmon were so plentiful and so big, and the water was so shallow that the salmon would actually break the surface of the water. So these bears were not at all interested in us. I was shooting with the Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens, but I rarely had to go out to 600 millimeters. These guys came pretty close, and as I said, we were there safely with a guide, and we were not imposing on them, and they certainly were not imposing on us. They were not in the least afraid of us, nor should they have been. So it was a fantastic experience, Karen.
Yeah, you can tell he's really not looking at you.
Nope.
He's trying to spot the next salmon.
He's spotting the salmon over here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I actually see them down here.
Yeah, you probably do.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what a great shot. So,
Well,
thanks for sharing
it
that
was
one with
fun.
us. So, Anne, with your stallion on a beach picture that we talked about, we mentioned that it was a prize winner with Camera Club of Richmond in our end-of-year competition. And I know you've had many, many, many of those. But take us back a little bit to when you first joined. What enticed you to join CCR? And then let's throw in VPPA, the Virginia Professional Photographers Association as well. And how did that fit into your thought process of developing your style, developing your expertise along the way?
Great question. Well, it all goes back to the beginning, as many things do. I mentioned earlier that I was introduced to photography in a classroom by Linda Richardson, and she gave us a handout, and she said, these are some camera clubs in Richmond. You might want to check them out. And I did. And the one that fit me best at the time, and still does, is the Camera Club of Richmond. And I joined it immediately. And for the first year or two, I did not enter any photograph in for evaluation because I was just beginning to figure out how the club worked and what I was needing to do to emerge or evolve as a photographer. However, after a couple of years, I became very comfortable with the group. It's a very welcoming group. And I said, gosh, I think I'll put in a few images as well. So that's kind of how that started. But it was Linda who introduced me to the Camera Club of Richmond. Then, fast forward to January 2020, we were about to enter the pandemic, but we didn't know that we were going to. And Jamie Hayes from VPPA, Virginia Professional Photography Association, gave a presentation, and he talked about the different elements of a great photograph and judging, and he was just very engaging. And it would never have occurred to me if he had not spoken to our group that, my goodness, you don't have to be a professional photographer to join the VPPA. So quite frankly, I joined it immediately within about a week or so. And much like the Camera Club of Richmond, the folks at the VPPA are so welcoming, particularly of an amateur. And one of the things that has helped me with that group is to listen both to how the CCR evaluators evaluate and how the VPPA evaluators evaluate. So after a year or so, I entered some photographs there too. And the goal was not necessarily to win an award, but to make my photography better. And I think that's the goal, at least for me, in these evaluations and in the contest. And then when you hear how the evaluator thinks about the images, you either consciously or subconsciously begin to incorporate that into the image acquisition and also in the processing. So I just love both societies or groups. And I think the thing about the VPPA is I really wanted to compete with professionals and just kind of see what I could learn from them, go on field trips with them, and then do the same with the CCR.
Right.
So it was a great mix.
Yeah, super. And she's too modest to tell you that she walked away with all the awards, I think, this past year. An armful, anyway, of awards this past year. So I'm gonna put you on the spot and tell us what those awards were with VPPA, because that was just amazing.
Yeah, well, it was a good session.
It was a good year.
I think I got the Court of Honor for the Landscape Award. And that means I think that you were in second place for that out of all entries in landscape. The other was the best wildlife or nature photograph, and they call them portraits. And this actually was a portrait of a bear catching a fish in Alaska, so I called that Catch of the Day. Both of those were accepted into the Commonwealth collection, which is kind of all of the major ranking photographs. They then elect, I guess, the top ones from that. So that was a great honor.
And they create a book. Right?
And create a book.
They create a book, just like
they create a book.
creates books.
But then the other piece was, that came as a great surprise. I was one of the top 10 photographers from the VPPA in 2022.
Absolutely.
So that was 2023, excuse me. So that was a great surprise. But they are, I think the main piece to take away is that they're a very welcoming society, as is the CCR, and both provide opportunities for growth. And I think that's what we want to do, get better.
Learn
while we're enjoying it.
Right. Exactly. Well, I wanted to thank you for sharing your office and your beautiful photography and your thoughts and your passion with us. It's been really great to get to know you a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all of this, and thanks for watching CCR Spotlights. We will sign off now.
There you go.